Welcome to the Beyond the Physical podcast, where we ask one simple question: how is movement transforming people's lives? Whether you're involved in physical education, sport, or physical activity, this is the podcast for you to delve deeper into the real life stories of how movement is being used as a force for good. This is Beyond the Physical. In today's episode, we are joined by Martin Brockman. Martin is a former decathlete that went on to win the bronze medal at the 2010 Commonwealth Games in Delhi. We are going to unpick his relationship with movement and how that inspired him to achieve his potential, but also now how he's inspiring others to do the same. So I'm delighted to be joined by Martin Brockman. And Martin, we met in Singapore back in September, and a lot of our work's aligned. So going to be a really interesting conversation this in terms of your experience and where you come from as well, and where you got to in terms of your achievements in your sport as well, which I'm sure we'll dive into in a second. But yeah, first question from me really, Martin, is just about how we're going to use this golden thread of movement really, because when we look at coaching, we look at teaching, we look at athlete development, underpinning it all, and that's sort of a golden thread is this element of movement. So I just wanted you to share with the audience really how movement has played a part in your journey and helping you arrive where you are today, and yeah, how it's impacted you really.
I mean, I'm a decathlete, so come from an all-rounder background. So actually, I didn't start athletics until I was quite late. I first started when I was 13, didn't take it seriously at all until I was about 17 or 18. But what I'd done previously is a whole range of sports. So I actually played basketball at school, was my main sport. I played football, I'd done judo. And when I was at school, I was in every single team: rugby, cricket, hockey. So I played anything I could because I just loved sport. And that meant when I then went into athletics, I could pretty much pick up any event that I wanted to. So I was the guy in the athletics team who filled in for all the technical events, the high jump, the hurdles, the pole vault, that no one else could do. And then that meant basically if I picked up the throws as well, shot put, discus, javelin, that makes you a decathlete. So I actually wasn't very good at anything in particular, which is how I ended up doing multiple events. But I could lay my hands to any event. And now I'm still the same. I can just go and have a game of tennis. Haven't played it for years, but the movement skills are there because I've got such a broad curriculum from my youth.
I think you're being slightly humble there to be a Commonwealth medalist and say that you weren't particularly good at any one particular event, but I take your point in it. But I just want to go back to a point. You talked about there that you loved sport. Where did that, I just want to dig a little bit deeper. Where's that love come from? Like what's influenced that love? So you said you love playing basketball, you love playing in different sports and different activities, and you tried things. And where do you think that original sort of desire came from?
I think two things really. One was I was pretty big as a kid in primary school, which meant it was the thing that probably came most naturally to me in terms of performance. But also I was a very, very shy kid, which you wouldn't necessarily know now. But I couldn't really speak to people, couldn't really speak to adults. So sport was the way that I could express myself. I was really keen to be a leader in sport. I was happy to get in front of people and show them what I could do. And I couldn't necessarily do that verbally. So it kind of gave me an avenue to express myself when I was in that kind of primary age.
Yeah, and how was that sort of, so you talked there about sort of maybe a lack of confidence in those early years. So that developed over time. Was there anybody in particular that influenced that and supported you with that? Or was there a moment where, you were able to grow that confidence because somebody, gave you that reassurance or gave you that validation? Who else has played an influence in that journey?
I mean, for me, primary school, my primary school was a very small school, but we had 2 or 3 teachers that were really interested in PE. And so there was a sports activity every single night. And some of them were from the sports specialists, some of them were from the maths specialist who decided to run a cricket club that I went along to. But really that it's kind of the school's ethos, I think, that they encourage sport. And it allowed me to do literally something every single night after school. And then I continued that through into my secondary school. And actually in secondary, I was a bit of a late developer. which made it a little bit more difficult. But I had that one teacher that said to me, you should go and try athletics at a club. And I think, again, not because I was particularly good at it, but because I obviously enjoyed it, which was probably more important.
Just going into this bit around being a late developer then. So just give us a little bit more detail on that, because you've gone on to achieve what many people won't achieve in terms of their maybe trying to pursue excellence in a sport. So in my mind, we've got two routes, and we've got that excellence route where people are trying to perform in whatever level that is, whatever environment that is. And we've also got a participation route, which is equally as important. But talk to me a little bit more about then that development model for you in particular, and then potentially, how those fundamental movements may have needed to be revisited at a certain point. Because I suppose what we often see is we get caught up in this culture that fundamental movement skills is only for those lower school age groups, maybe 4 to 7, but clearly there your development's happened at a different stage.
Yeah, I mean, I was probably at primary school. I was huge. I was a huge kid, the tallest kid in the school, which gave me a huge advantage. But then when puberty kicks in, or kicks in for everyone around you, but not you, suddenly you're not the big kid anymore. So then I lost my advantage in terms of physicality. So I had to then go and learn the skills. But also I then grew to be someone who's 6'6", almost 2 meters tall. And as you're growing, your limb lengths are changing, your body weight's changing, your strength abilities are changing. So you have to learn the skills almost every year. When I was coaching at my local athletics club, I had a girl that grew to be 6'2". I had a guy that grew to be 6'4". And literally after the summer, we'd have to go back to those fundamental movement skills again as part of their physical development program, because they were a different kid than they left in the summer.
So you've given yourself a really solid base there then in terms of what's to come next in your career, but also your relationship with movement as well. So we've got that positive relationship probably in a primary setting because of external influences and your own internal motivation as well. Then you've had that late sort of development where other children are starting to catch you up physically as well in terms of like peak height velocity and those types of things. Then what I'm interested next, Martin, is like, what then drove you to take that love to then say, actually, I'm going to drive to try and make an Olympic Games, to try and make a Commonwealth Games, to try and make that British squad. What drove you then internally to push from participation to that route?
I mean, I was actually kind of on the verge of falling out of love with it at the end of my school career. So I got to that difficult age, 16, 17, where, other social things take over. And it was probably the fact that we had the London Olympics coming was what saved me. Because I was training maybe once or twice a week by that point. I was kind of on my way out. And then I remember being at school when they announced, we had it on the big screen in the hall, the London Olympics is coming. And everyone was jumping up and down, celebrating. I just sat there quietly and thought, you know what, I'm gonna go. I had no right to go at this point, ranked like 200th or something in the country, but I'm gonna go. So that was my inspiration. It was like that there's probably not many once in a lifetime opportunities. And that was one for me. And it gave me a sense of purpose. I think I was kind of done with school. I wasn't sure where I was going next. And there was something I could actually work towards. So the London Olympics probably saved me, really.
So on that, I'm always interested in this question. I ask it everybody as well. So on that rainy November morning, where you've got to get yourself out of bed and it's dark mornings and the clouds are there and it's raining, was that the hook for you that you kept going back to then, or did something else grow from that in terms of, I'm just interested in this storyline we've got now, right from those fundamental movements in primary. So you're then having this, sort of quandary in terms of your confidence, then that late development. Now we're onto a bit of where you've got that hook with the Olympics. What kept getting you out of bed? Because people see the end result a lot, don't they, in society now? We see the Instagram posts, we see people on the podium, but actually that journey, that hardship, that difficulty that we all face, regardless of what profession we're in. I'm just interested to know now, what was that, getting you out of bed and keeping you going when you were maybe ranked where you didn't want to be ranked?
I mean, I think from the start, I was on a real learning journey. So because like I can't explain to you how bad I was when I first started. And people don't really believe me when I tell them. But I went from nowhere to literally nowhere, second in the county, I think I was, maybe third in the county, to third at the Commonwealth Games within 4 years. I was literally learning the events from the beginning. So all the throwing events, I was really learning to run still at that point. Having been a late developer, I grew 10 centimeters from 16 to 18. I was still growing at that point. But I was on a real learning journey. So I was learning to throw, I was learning all the feet positions. So every single week, every single session, I was getting slightly better. And that happened for 4 years. It wasn't until after the Commonwealth Games and then, okay, now I'm a serious athlete. And you start to creep in, you have your first bad year. But I had a 4 year run of just getting better and better all the time. Every single competition was a new personal best. Every single training session, I could see the improvements. And that's one of the values of decathlon, is that there's so much to learn that even after 10 years, you can't possibly learn all of it.
So the next big question then is, and leads perfectly on from that, is your transition to coaching and helping others. So the next question really is, how then have you used your experience to then inspire others to move, both from, because I know you've worked in that elite environment as well, but also with your work now with the schools work you do, how have you helped, or how are you helping others, both teachers, coaches, and young people, to develop that love for movement? Whether whatever pathway they go down, what's your experience now in terms of shaping others?
I mean, I coached the whole way through my career. So actually, when I started coaching at 16, and when I left school, I started coaching fairly seriously because it was a way to fund my training. But it was also a way for me to experiment with the movements and have to understand the movements really well, because I was teaching someone else, and that then fed back into my movement as well. So in teaching others, I also got better myself, which was great. But you can't learn 10 events. Most athletes are training the whole week on one event. So we're training maybe once a week or twice a week. So what we look to do is to teach movement skills that underpin athletics in general, and finding the movement skills that transfer across multiple events. So now I'm working with teachers who are in a similar situation of, we need to do the events and we have really limited time. Here's the skills that I've worked out are the ones that transfer best across the most events. And here's how you teach those skills across all of those events. So my workshops start with sprinting skills, because sprinting underpins sprints, hurdles, all of the jumps, even into javelin, into distance running. So there's certain postures and positions that we can teach, and we can just teach them across the board, basically.
Yeah, and that's both across sort of primary and secondary then, in terms of, we've probably got colleagues on the call that are teaching athletics and probably, would be looking for you for those, I don't know, top 3 tips of how you would go about teaching athletics in both a primary and secondary setting. What would you say? I mean, either or really, in terms of what would be your sort of even golden rules around teaching athletics, or your non-negotiables. What would you go for immediately? I know that's a broad question in terms of the different events, but what would you look for in terms of a high quality teaching or coaching session?
Well, I mean, I tried to start by understanding the move skills that we're trying to teach, and then can we use sport to teach those skills? So as much as we can, we're actually doing implicit learning. We think with our feet is the same rhythm we've just learned implicitly in the hurdles. So I try to gamify it possible, to simplify it as much as possible, that literally we're teaching 2 or 3 skills in this whole lesson, and then as we move through the age groups, we start to refine those skills and move into explicit teaching. But for as much as possible, I'm trying to keep it implicit learning and allow them to experiment with the event and experiment with the movement.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, random question for you to finish with. Need you to pick a number 1 to 6, Martin.
Um,
Say that again. You've just cut out 1 to 6.
okay. We'll take number three. Rule of the middle. Number three.
Number 3. Okay, perfect. So number 3 is around, and we've touched upon this already, is around nurture versus nature. So getting to a Commonwealth podium, was it nature? Was it nurture? Was it a combination of the both? What piece of the link, if it was missing, might have not allowed you to get to that point?
So I don't consider myself to be that talented, but that's because I've competed against some people that are absolute freaks. When you see the people at the top, you realize how talented people are. So I was competing against Dean Macy, who was the British number one. He's the same height as me. He weighs 10 kilos more, even though he looks smaller than me, and he's twice as strong as me. And I just don't know how. And I competed against the world record holder, and he's just unbelievable. And you realize that's a level of talent I don't have. What I did have was that I'm 6'6", which really, really helps. It helps me in a sport like decathlon. As long as you end up in the right sport, I'll be a terrible gymnast. But what I think on the nature nurture thing is, the only part you can do anything about is the nurture. Nature is about finding a sport that fits your nature, making sure you're in the right sport if you want to go to an elite level. But the only thing you can do anything about is nurture. So I basically worked my ass off, worked incredibly hard to maximize what nature had given me. So I don't really think it matters. I think, to be honest, I think everybody has talent because everybody's shape is different, everybody's size and speed is different. It's about finding the sport that suits your nature, and then you focus in on the nurture, which is the only bit we can do anything about.
Brilliant. Martin, with loads of key points there for anybody listening, coaches, teachers, young people. It's been absolute great insight. We want to keep these short and sharp, but thank you for your time. Much appreciated. I know I've had a few connection issues. I'm in Bangkok and Martin's in China, so a couple of connection issues there, but hopefully it's not too bad. But Martin, thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us. I'm really looking forward to working with you in the future. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.